Welcome to episode 38 of the Landlady Boss podcast. I'm here with my sister and co-host Rachel. Hello, Rachel. How are you doing?
Hi, Marie. I'm doing really well. How is everything?
I'm doing well too. I've had a very high adventure week. So as we've mentioned on past episodes, our sister Valerie is here visiting with two of her kids, and she's been here for over 3 weeks. So it's been really fun. Lots of adventures and just hanging out together and cousin time. So I've been loving it. But last week we took our kids volcano boarding. This has been on her bucket list, something that she has wanted to do, and my two kids that I brought with me have never done it. I did it years ago with my older ones, but my 17-year-old and 13-year-old, they have never been. So this was kind of an exciting adventure, something they wanted to do, but it was not easy to get to. It took a lot of planning, a four-wheel drive vehicle. I rented a truck. You go there and you're getting to this volcano. In the last 45 minutes, the road is like deep black volcanic sand and really rough roads. You have to have four-wheel drive. And then you arrive at this volcano, and you have your sled that you rent, and they give you this gear, a bag of gear. It's like a coverall outfit, and then goggles to cover your eyes, and super, super gorgeous green and super baggy, and it's not the most flattering thing, but it protects you from all of the rocks and dirt and grit. So it was just quite an experience. You have to have a guide, and you follow him. You hike an hour up this volcano with like rocks and wind and heat, all the things. And you can either hire someone to carry, like a Sherpa. They could carry it for you, but knowing me, I carried my board the whole way. Like, I had to do it. I was going to make sure that I could do it to challenge. So carried my board all the way up, and then they show you where to go, and you get suited up, and then you sled down the side of the volcano on volcanic sand and rocks. It was so fun.
Wow.
I know. And you have like dirt and rock. Keep your mouth closed. Like, as you're going down, all this dirt and rocks are flying in your face. And it's just crazy. I don't know where else you can do that but Nicaragua, maybe other places, but it's not very common. And if you want to see a video of me doing it, check out our Facebook or Instagram, because I have a video on there of me sledding down the volcano. So take a peek. It's pretty funny.
I saw that. I wanted to be there. It was amazing. It looked so much fun and dirty, but it looked amazing.
It was dirty. Yeah. You have rock like everywhere after you're done, and they're like, oh, there's these showers here for you to use, but they're like public, and there's bees swarming, and I was like, I think I'm okay. I'll just do like a little sink wash, just kind of wash my face off. It was an experience. Yeah, a little bird bath.
That's amazing. So. I love it.
It was very fun. Very fun. So when you come to Nicaragua, I'll have to take you to do that.
I can't wait. I would love that. Yeah. So today we're going to talk about security deposits, because I think that's what a lot of people ask. That question just seems to come up a lot. It's be a question like, okay, I had to clean the carpets. Is that security deposit? Or there was a broken faucet, is that a damage? Or what if, is there a certain amount of time? All of these questions about what you can take out of a security deposit and what you can't. And so that has come up a ton. So let's talk about that.
I think it's a really important topic, because you think, oh, it's money that you take from the tenant at the beginning of their lease to cover any damages at the end, right? Well, there's a lot of details in there that are very state specific that you're going to want to be aware of before going into this. Anytime you're taking money from someone in real estate, you've got to be able to track it and follow it. And so today we're going to discuss how you store that money, what you can use it for, how much you can charge for the deposit. So there's different things that go into it.
Right. And I think that tenant deposits is one of those things that it's sitting on the side. It's in a separate account, which is super important, and we'll go into that. But that it's set aside, and it doesn't come up until the time when you need to use it for the damages. And if you did not put it in the right place, if you did not collect enough, if you didn't take care of it properly, then it's a big responsibility for a landlord to take care of the security deposit. So it's a big deal. I think a common mistake, and that came up in our last podcast, and we were talking with the bookkeeper. A common mistake is people will put their security deposits in with their rent income, the commingle those, and that's a no-no in every state.
I think that is a big mistake that people make with the deposits. They just either put it in with their own funds or with the rent account. Maybe they have an account for that property, but they just commingle those funds, and that is a big thing to avoid. You have to really be careful that you have a separate account for your deposits, and each state is different, so really make sure you check your state to make sure, because if it's an interest-bearing account, you may be required to give that interest back to the tenant if they have been there after their lease. So that's something to make sure that you know.
Right.
Indiana, I'm not required to give interest back to the tenant. I definitely do keep them in a separate account for sure and keep them separate, but it just depends on your state.
Yeah. And another common mistake that I've found is that in your contract, you may put, okay, the deposit's $14.95 and $200 of that is non-refundable. But then when you go to return the deposit back to the tenant, either they forgot or you forgot, and you might just give them back the whole deposit if it's clean and you're just like, okay, done. But just remember, because if they've lived there for 3 years, sometimes you don't go back and look at their contract before you process the deposit. And that is really important to know how much of that did you set aside as non-refundable so that you can use that to work with. So don't forget to go back and look at the contract as you're figuring out their deposit to return.
Absolutely, yeah, making sure you know, because you don't want to do anything wrong with the deposit. And so yeah, making sure you're not commingling those funds, making sure if the tenant needs to know where they're being held, that they are notified of that. And then that brings us to, how much should you even charge for the deposit? That may be super basic for some people, but I think just getting into it, there's the question, like, what can I charge? How much should I charge? And, I've seen it all over the place, but one typical rule of thumb is, 1 month's rent, and each state is different also. Some will say, you can't charge more than 2 months rent, or it could be the first and last month's rent, or things like that. So being aware of that. And some states say there's no limit. I mean, obviously you have to go with the market rates and can't just charge unlimited amounts of money, or no one's going to rent from you. But being aware of that. But I think typically 1 month's rent is what I see as the norm.
What's interesting is Idaho also has a new rule about that they have a maximum that you can only charge up to 1 month's rent as a maximum security deposit that you can charge. And so, I mean, it's just, these are things that you need to look up and see. But when you're thinking about your security deposit, you think about how new the building is, how nice it is. If it's brand new and it has gorgeous appliances and some really expensive finishes, then you're going to want a really good security deposit to protect that asset. If it's older and the carpet's older and you're planning on redoing it after this tenant's moving out anyway, then maybe that's not, maybe you want to lower that security deposit so you can get more applicants in who are attracted to that. It's just figuring out that is, I think those are interesting factors.
Yeah, there's no hard and fast rule for sure. I mean, you could definitely assess each property and come up with the amount. I know when I've had people ask if they could make payments for the security deposit, or could they pay part at first and then over the next 3 months after they move in, pay more. I absolutely do not do that. I would highly recommend not to do that. I feel like that is a red flag if they don't have that money up front. And then once they're in there, what if they don't pay you the rest of it and you have to go after damages or unpaid rent or all these things? And so super, super important to get the deposit from the get-go. Before you give any keys, you need the first month's rent and that deposit.
Right. And don't remove your listing until after they've signed the contract and pay the deposit. Like, that's another pro tip that's just really important. Wait until you have the security deposit in hand, then remove the listing. If they're asking you, they're like, okay, we really, really want it, and you get excited about that, and you're like, okay, I'm done. You've just lost that time that you could have gotten other applicants by removing it from the market before you actually had it solidified by the security deposit. So,
absolutely. Yeah. And I hate to say it, I learned that the hard way. At the beginning, I had a guy I knew, not a friend, but he did some painting jobs for us, but I had a 1-bedroom apartment come up. I tell you this so you can all realize, like, it is normal to make mistakes or things
Very.
happen. Like we don't have it all figured out from the get-go. And so that's why we try to give you all these tips and advice and things so that you will hopefully not make some of the same mistakes that we did. But I had
Right.
this guy, and he wanted the 1-bedroom apartment. Great. He wanted to move in a certain day. He was gonna meet my assistant there and get the keys and do everything. And well, he met her, but he didn't have the lease signed, and he didn't have the security deposit or rent, but he
Mm-hmm.
needed the keys because he needed to move in some things, and he was going to give that to her. And I mean, you can see how this went. And so he had the
Yes.
keys, and he was going to get us the money. Well, he never did, and he didn't even actually move in. But
Oh.
a few days went by, and we said, hey, you were going to meet us later and get us the money and everything, and he kind of ghosted us. And
Oh.
so it was kind of a mess because we're like, hey, we don't have a signed lease, we don't have the money from him, but he has the keys and access to it. So
Mm-hmm.
fortunately, before we had to change locks, he said, I actually decided to do something else, and he gave the key
Oh.
back, and it didn't
Oh my
turn into a
gosh.
total nightmare. But talk about lost time. And like you had
Ooh.
said, I took the listing down. I thought it was rented, and so then I've had to go back and list it and find a new tenant, and it just wasted so much time, and it could have caused a
Oh
lot of
yeah.
problems if he had gone in and caused any damage. So then from
Mm-hmm.
then on, it's like no keys unless a signed lease and the deposit and the rent is paid.
Right. So let's take that to like the worst case scenario, which is you gave him the keys. He goes in, and let's say it's really cold and you were dripping the pipes. He turns that off. Pipes freeze, they burst, flood everywhere. You're not going in because you figure it's rented. He's not even in there. Two
Yeah.
weeks go by. You find out that you have a horrible situation and you gave him the
Yeah.
keys. So you're now legally,
And I
you
have no
know,
recourse
you have no
to go.
recourse because you have
Yeah.
no deposit. Nothing. Yeah.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
that's a bad one. Like the
Could have been
security
awful.
deposit, right? And most states have that law where money needs to exchange hands in order to solidify a contract. So a contract is not ratified until there's money exchanged. So you not having a security deposit, even if you have a signed contract, still means the contract's worth nothing until you've received money. So that's a big one. Mhm.
That's a good point. But yeah, I mean, we all make mistakes, and you think, oh, this
Yeah.
person I know, it's going to be
I
fine.
trust. Yeah.
No, don't
Oh yeah.
mingle, the acquaintances, friends, and business, and just have your
Yeah.
criteria laid out. It's to protect you and your asset for sure.
Right. Right. Yeah. So I think setting expectations in the lease agreement is really important. That's your signed contract. So everything you talk about verbally, you put in that contract, and that includes what you're doing with security deposit. It includes how much it's going to be, how much is non-refundable, what portion of that is a pet fee, what portion of that is a non-refundable portion of the pet deposit, and a refundable portion. So you have all of these parts to it, and you want to make sure that that's in the lease so that there's no gray area of what money they gave you and what it was used for.
Right, and especially if you have multiple units, it's helpful. I mean, they may be there a year, 3 years, 5 years. It's helpful to have that lease,
Yeah.
and you can go back and you say, oh, yes, this is the amount they pay. Because sometimes it may not be the same as the rent, like you were saying, if you charged extra or less for some reason, and so having that amount in the lease, and you can see, oh, yeah, and they did a pet
Mm-hmm.
fee and they did this, and, all those details. So making sure it's all laid out is super important. And then
Right.
also making sure that they understand the expectations, or what will come out of the, or what you expect them to do, and taking them through when you check them in, and having that check in, check out tenant list. That's so
Mm-hmm.
important. We have that for free on our website at landladyboss.com if you want a free copy of that. Because if you sign the lease with them and they move in, and then when they move out, they say, hey, that's not my damage. I didn't cause that.
Right.
If you didn't have that form when they checked in that you went through with them, and you looked at everything and took pictures of everything and have a signed document with them, not pointing that damage out as already there, then you don't really have a lot of recourse. It's, your word versus theirs, or, I
Right.
think it was fine. I don't remember. So have those time-stamped pictures, have that form that they signed and where they go through and they point out any damage. And so when they do move out, if they say there's damage and it wasn't on the check-in form, then okay, this is new damage.
Yeah, in fact, I just have a woman who moved out and she left it really clean, but there's a crack in the faucet in the sink in the bathroom, and it's
Oh
just
no.
all the way through it. So it's going to need to be replaced. And she said, "No, that was there when I got there. I sent pictures. It's bigger now, but it was there." And the problem is you don't know. I don't know because I don't think I've
Mm-hmm.
ever had a tenant say, yeah, that's my damage. I mean, usually
No.
it's like, oh, that's pre-existing. Always. And so if you don't have that, that move-in, that check-in damage inspection form filled out where you signed it and they signed it, it's really hard to not have hard feelings. Even if you said, sorry, that was, I have no emails where you told me it was there. I've got nothing. So I'm going to charge you for it. You can be totally in the right where you can charge them for the damage, but they will have hard feelings. They can leave bad reviews. They leave that whole years with you with a bad taste in their mouth. And so it's just, you both can be doing the right thing and it still can end badly. So making it really, really clear keeps that good relationship between you. Even if they have to pay for it, you're like, okay, well, I'm so sorry that happened, but you can prove it. You can back up what you're saying with documentation. So it keeps the good feelings.
Exactly, because it
Yeah.
doesn't always end where people are happy with each other, but we do really try to keep those good relationships up. And I can't tell you how many times I get recommendations from other people, especially if
Hmm.
you're in a smaller city. They say, "Oh, such and such recommended you. Do you have any rentals available? I really want to rent from you, or I've heard really good things about your property management business or your rentals." And I get that all the time. And so it is important to try to keep the good communication. It doesn't mean people are going to be happy with you all the time, but
Right.
at least they feel like they were treated fairly. And so when they do move out, you have an itemized deposit statement. And that brings us to our next point. You're going to really want to make sure that you know your state's time period to return the deposit in, and to make sure that you know when you are legally responsible to return the deposit to them and that itemized statement.
And that can be anywhere from 21 days to 45 days. It changes by state, but you want to make sure you have also in your contract how long you're going to take. So you have the state law, and then you make sure that you put in there what it is so that you can always refer back to your contract too. And you say, okay, well, as per the contract, it's going to take 45
Mm-hmm.
days. Yeah, that's helpful.
I feel like as soon as people move out, they are asking for that deposit. When am I going to get that deposit? I mean, of course, they
Yeah,
want their deposit back as
right,
soon as possible. Need money when they're moving and doing
right.
a new deposit somewhere else, a new rent. So, obviously, they want that money as soon as possible, but it's important that you know your state rules regarding it. Indiana has a 45-day rule. And
Mm.
so I have 45 days to return the deposit and an itemized statement with it, and I can go up to that amount of time. Now, people will ask starting right away, like, when will I get my deposit? When will I get my deposit? And I say, well, we
Mhm.
have up to 45 days to get it to you. Not that I'm trying to be mean, but it takes time for you
Mhm.
to get workers in there. Sometimes it's cut and dry. It looks great.
Mhm.
There were no issues. I can cut you a check and send it to you in this time frame. But sometimes it takes time. You've got to get workers in there. You've got to get painters in
Yeah.
there, repair people, contractors. And not only does it take time to get them in there, hopefully you've had them all lined up and scheduled, especially if you've done our signature 24-hour no rent loss tenant turnover course, which we
Yeah.
have on our website. But if you've done that, you have them all lined up. So hopefully you're not waiting weeks just to get them in. But
Yeah.
if you are waiting for their work to be done, once that's done, then you have to wait for their invoices. This
Mhm.
could take every bit of 45 days, honestly. And so I've even had to contact some workers and say, hey, can you give me an amount that that's what you're
Mhm.
going to charge me, even if you don't have my invoice ready
Mhm.
yet, because I need to know that amount so I can send the itemized statement to
Mhm.
the tenant. So sometimes it's less time even. Rachel, what's it in Idaho?
It's 21 days. So
Wow.
Yeah, that's a recent change also. It used to be 30. So, as I was listening to Marie, I was remembering this story. I had a tenant and I walked in and it looked good and she was in a rush. And so, we opened cupboards and we looked around and it was like she had cleaned really, really well. So I'm like, okay, great. And so I had told her, yeah, it looks good. Let's both sign. And then she left. And then I saw that there was like baseboards where her dog had bitten some of the baseboards after she left. And I saw some other damage that had happened. It kind of was, she wanted it to go faster because she kind of wanted to not look at the damage, and she cleaned enough that when you walk in, you have this false feeling that everything is perfect. And so two things I learned from this. One was that you do a very, very, a good look at the property with them and you sign it and they sign it. But you say, okay, we're going to go through it and turn it over and I'll let you know if there's anything that comes up. But if you do see damage while they're there, they're going to want you to tell them right then how much that's going to be out of their deposit. And that's not something that you should ever promise. So what you need to do is make sure you just say, okay, well, what we'll do is we'll get someone to come in and fix it. And then I'll send you the exact cost of what it costs to replace this or fix this. If you do any estimates and you're wrong, let's say you say, oh, it shouldn't be more than 20, 30 bucks, even to clean it, like, oh, it shouldn't be more than 100 bucks for that, or whatever you rolls off your tongue, that now is considered a commitment of price. So it better be at that price or less. But if it's more than that, that's when you get in trouble, because then you go and send them a bill for 140 and they're like, no, you said 100. So you need to make sure that you don't give a dollar amount until you have a dollar amount to tell them that's based on actual costs.
Right, and you absolutely want those invoices so you can show proof that this is the work I had done and this is how much it cost. People will definitely dispute and complain, when I send over the itemized deposit form and they see, damage for this or this and this, they don't always argue, but they definitely want to know more information about it, or can you let me know like what you had to do to that or what that's referring to. And so it's just really good to have those invoices. And then it's also important to realize if you don't return the deposit and that form within that set amount of time by your state, then the tenant's actually entitled to the full amount of the security plus any reasonable legal fees if they come after you for the deposit. So it's super, super important that you make sure that you return it within the allotted time frame. So not only is it really important to make sure that you know that timeline, because legally they could come after you and get their whole deposit back, but you're also protecting yourself and avoiding disputes down the road. So you really want to make sure you know your state's guidelines for that amount of time. And as you mentioned, Rachel, doing that walkthrough is so important to do that with the tenant. I've had times when, they just say, okay, we're out, and they didn't wait till we had that set up time to meet. And so that's kind of difficult because you go over there and you try to do like a video and have it time stamped and stuff. But best case scenario is that you meet them there, you walk through it with them, they show any damages they know, you're taking pictures, you have that checkout form that we have a free copy of, and you have them sign it, anything that they find and that you find, and so that it's just all covered, so that if there are any disputes when you send out that form, within that time frame, you send the deposit back, but also an itemized detailed deposit form. When you send that form back and you have on it, painting or damage or unpaid rent or all these categories on there, that you will fill it out, but then you have those pictures and things to support it, because people will ask questions. Right. Everyone wants as much back as they can get, of course.
Absolutely. No, I think that's the best way to avoid the hard feelings and the dispute about whether you took out the right amount, is to include all of those things and get it back to them in a timely manner is amazing. Like that's a big part of being a landlady. So good. Thanks, Marie.
Yeah. And the deposit, as we've gone over today, this is just part one. We're going to do a part two for the following week because there's just so much to cover with the deposit. So I just want to make sure that we get all the details with it, because, today we're kind of covering how to collect it, how much to charge, and what's the time frame to do it in, and how to protect yourself. But there is so much more to still cover with the deposit, so we are going to cover that in part 2, what's included in the deposit.
And then also we have some really good tips about different ways to collect the security deposit that if you don't have a traditional way. So yeah.
So part 2, make sure you listen to that so you get even more details about the deposit. Thank you so much for listening today. Hopefully this was helpful. Please share and subscribe and let other Landlady Bosses know. We have these available on YouTube. You can go to Landlady Boss, our YouTube channel, and you can watch them if you'd rather watch than listen. And make sure that you check out our social media on Facebook and Instagram. And of course, if you have any questions or topic ideas, we'd love to hear from you at landladybosses@gmail.com. So lots of ways to communicate with us, and we would love to hear from you. And if no one has told you thank you today for everything that you do, we're here to tell you thank you. Thank you for working so hard to make your rentals wonderful places that people can call home, because I know it's a thankless job sometimes, and often you don't get the thanks that you deserve or want to hear. So thank you so much. We are with you in this, and we understand how hard it is to be a landlady boss. So take care, have a great week, and remember, no one can manage your properties as well as you.